Good morning, this beautiful Sunday morning to our church school by the sea children. We hope we have some visitors with us and join us in the wonderful stories that we hear each Sunday. Remember, last week we had one of the first of God's promises. And how did we know it was going to come? How did we know what kind of promise it was? I think you remember a big rainbow. And some of you might have seen a rainbow this week with all the rain that we had. And we certainly knew how people felt about a flood with all the flooding streets that we had. So you remember that water was coming up all around and they were getting frightened. They didn't know what to do. And so God came to Noah and said, you need to build a big, big boat, a big ark, and gather all the people, all the animals and plants and everything, and put them on board and stay quietly, and you will see there'll be a promise that will come true. So he did that, and they sat in that boat for a long, long time, waited and were frightened. And then suddenly they peeked through the windows and they saw the sun and they saw this beautiful rainbow. They knew then that that water would dry up and they would be safe. So remember that story. When you see a rainbow in the sky, that's another one of God's promises. Today's story is about another promise. And a different symbol will come up. So think about the name of the story, A Star Promise, and listen and see how this one comes true. Some of us have small families. This is about families and how they grow. Like you may just have a mom and dad and an uncle or something like that. Or you may have 6 or 7 sisters and brothers and uncles and aunts and so forth. And so each family is different. And long ago in this story, these 2 people were longing for a baby. It was Abraham and Sarai, and they had to wait a long time. God kept telling me, wait, wait, wait. Just like the people on the ark, waited. And when you wait, you wonder, is this going to really come true? Are we really going to get a baby? And they were getting older and older. So they didn't expect the baby. And as we said, babies come in all bunches. Some come in 1, some come in 2, some in 3. Miss Vat had a big surprise with her bunch.
Yes, the families do come in all shapes and sizes. And sometimes, as you said, we have a small family. But when we include all of our aunts and cousins and grandpas, etc., it can become bigger. And sometimes, we actually have cousins and relatives that we have never even met. And so people love to find out about their ancestry, their heritage, and all about the people who lived before them. And in my family, we were small because we had just a mom and a dad and a daughter. And then we had this unexpected surprise of growing by 2. Because way back in the 1960s, dare I mention it, we didn't have all these wonderful pieces of equipment and knowledge. So you and I didn't even know the sex of our baby until the baby was born. I mean, so when during this time, I did have to leave where we were living because we were evacuated, just like when you have a hurricane here and you have to leave town because it's dangerous. The country we were living in, Pakistan, was in a little confrontation with India. And so all the women and children had to be moved away out of the danger. So I got my little girl and I am expecting, but I kept moving to England and then to America and so on. When I came back, I went to see the doctor, and he kept thinking, I think there's 2 babies. I think there's more than 1 baby here. But in those days, the only way that they could really know was if they could hear 2 separate heartbeats. then the little heartbeats would say 2 babies or 3 heartbeats. And they couldn't hear but 1 heartbeat. So they were very, they didn't quite understand this. So they were quite sure there were 2 babies, but why? So when it was safe to have an x-ray, I went and had an x-ray, and sure enough, there were 2 little babies. So it was close to the day they were due. So we had to hustle and bustle and get ready for 2 babies instead of 1 baby. And I think we had a little problem because we only had 1 name for a boy and 1 name for a girl. So again, we had to choose a second name. And so we had Clyde decided upon, and then we had almost asking people. Sometimes naming babies can be hard. And so it was like, no, I don't like that name. Oh, no, not that name. But in the end, we decided happily on Andrew. So, excuse me. So we all are members of families. And, we have a long history in our families, hundreds and hundreds of years. And in Miami and in America, most people have come from somewhere else to live here. So it's very interesting to talk about your grandparents and your great-grandparents. And very often they didn't live here in America. They lived in another country somewhere else in the world. So maybe one evening when you're having supper with your mom and dad, talk about them and ask them questions, because sometimes we forget how interesting it is to know where we came from and where our great people in our family actually lived. So we're all living together in this wonderful story created by God.
Thank you, Valerie. Well, I had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, and all very close together, a little bit less than 2 years apart. And 2 were born in the US and 2 were born in the Philippines. And so we named them all Irish names. So we had a Bridget, a Patrick, a Brian, and an Aaron. And as time went on, we called them the Fighting Irish. It's fun to watch families grow, and as they go out and create their own families, we realize the importance of a family and how much we depend and love them. So today's story is about these 2 people that waited a long, long time and really wondered if God's promise would come true. So let's listen to it and hear about Abraham and Sarai in a star's promise, God's star's promise. A long, long time ago, there was a man and a woman named Abram and Sarai. They were a small family and had no children. One day, God had a surprise for them. God said, Abram, look up at the sky. Abram looked up at the dark night sky. Everywhere he looked, he could see sparkling, sparkling stars.
Now, said God, count the stars if you can. Oh, no, said Abram, there are too many stars in the sky. No one can do that. You're right, Abram, but that's how many people will be in your family someday. You and Sarai are going to have so many grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren. You won't even be able to count them. How can that be, thought Abram? How can we have lots and lots of grandchildren when Sarai and I have never even had a baby?
That was puzzling. But Abram and Sarai waited and waited and waited. They waited to have the child that God had promised them. They grew older and older. So you can imagine, they thought, when is this going to happen? I'm getting older and older. Still no child came. They grew older and still no child came. You're too old, said Sarai. We can't have children now. We're too old.
Then one day they received a message from God. It's time. You are going to have a baby. Abraham and Sarai thought this was very funny because they were so old now. but God had made them a promise, and God keeps promises.
And what do you think happened next? The very next year, Abram and Sarai had a baby. They named him Isaac. You can imagine how excited they were after waiting all this time.
Oh, amazing. And then God did one more thing. God changed Abram's and Sarai's names. God didn't change their names much, just enough for people to know that God was a very, very special part of their lives. Now they would be named Abraham and Sarah.
So Abraham and Sarah were so happy. Every time they looked at their little baby, they remembered God's promise once again. Your child will have many children, and those children will have many more children. And I will love every one of them. I will be your God and the God of all the babies and children and parents and adults in this world.
And that is just what happened. We know because God never stops loving us. That's really quite a beautiful story, because it reminds us that we are all God's children, all of us. Wherever we are, we're all part of his family. So I think you will remember last week, I hope most of you watching today did receive this little box. I think in the mail, maybe it came to you. And if you didn't get the box, every house, I'm sure you have maybe an envelope, and you could use the envelope for what we're going to do, and you could do, so you don't have to have, or if you have a little box in the house, you could always use that too. But any of those would work. So this little box is, I'm going to call it our box for Lent, because a week ago was Ash Wednesday, and that is the beginning of the period before Easter. And during that period, we are supposed to give up something. This is kind of an idea that we should stop. Usually we think of something that we eat, or maybe something that we do, but usually we think, my little grandson has given up French fries. I don't think he eats that many, but he loves them so. And sometimes we give up like cookies, or we give up chocolate, or something that's not really good for us, but we enjoy it. So we say for the next 6 weeks until Easter, we will not do those things or eat those things. So the idea is, if you give up something, especially you maybe save a little money, or if you have spending money. And so in this little box, you can maybe put a little money. And I didn't bring my dollar with me because I didn't buy my bar of chocolate this week. So I was going to put it in my little box. So it'll make a nice, sweet little box, and then you can decorate it. And I just got a little stapler, so that when I was, you could do it before you made it into a box, I suppose. But what I did was I thought maybe we could decorate it with some of the ideas from some of the stories that we've been reading recently. So on one side of the box, I drew a rainbow, and I wrote underneath the word promises. So that would be good. That reminds us of the promises maybe even the reminders of the promise we made that this month we would not do something, or we would do something like help our mothers without grouching, or, sometimes I'll wash the dishes to help, or, sometimes it's good to do something extra that people will appreciate. That's like you can, instead of, stopping something, you can give something to somebody. And these are the stars, which we talked about today. And sometimes people look at the sky at night, and they have this idea that in those stars represent all of the people, like their great people or so on. And so there is this idea of those stars in the sky are a memory of somebody who lived a long time ago, and they're smiling down at us, and we know how beautiful they are. So I had some little star stickers, so I put those on there with the rainbow. And then for today's story, I cut out, because we've been doing a lot of hearts this month, and so I cut out a couple of little hearts and I glued them on. And then I put, we are God's family. And that would remind us of being God's family. And I had a couple of little smiling faces here that would go with that. And then I had some little bird stickers. I mean, I know you can use your imaginations and decorate it. And then eventually, and I'm not quite sure when, maybe we can do it all the way to Easter, and even after Easter for a little while. And then I think whatever we have saved, we might give to the church, and they would use it to help somebody who needed some help. So there's your little box, and put it in a nice place, decorate it, and maybe encourage everybody in here to put a little something in, and to remind ourselves that it's always good to be a giver rather than a taker sometimes. So do you have an angel this week, Miss Joanne?
I know we'd all be celebrating if we're adding to our family and we have a new person, and it fills our hearts with joy. Mm-hmm. There's love involved in this, but most of all, it might be a good time to think of gratitude, of what you're thankful for.
Right. Oh, yes.
Your box, things that you're sharing with others. It'll make them have joy and happiness and love. So
yeah, I think sometimes we do need to say, remind ourselves that it's so easy when I don't have this and I don't have that. But you have to say, I have this, I have, I have more than enough. I have 5 pairs of shoes. I have a pair of shoes for every day. Or, so I think count your blessings is so important. And sometimes we do tend to think of all the things that we don't have and not enjoy all of the wonderful things that we have. So let's always remember that. So I had 2 angels, which I sort of liked today. And I thought that they went together. One is responsibility and the other is honesty. And I thought that honesty and truth are sort of the same meaning. So I thought, okay, I am going to be responsible and be honest and be honest about things. So I thought that was kind of a good reminder for me this week. And always love like yours. I think the dog had a little chew on my my love angel one day.
Their love that they did that.
So perhaps we all can remember to be very thankful for all the blessings that we have, and think and be kind and thoughtful to those who maybe right now are having not quite as much as us, and make sure that we remember people that we could be helpful to. And sometimes a kind smile is as helpful as full of joy as anybody needs to just know that somebody's smiling or full of kindness and love, because you don't want to go around and be a grouch. So I hope you all have a very happy week. And now we'll put our hands together and have a final prayer. Dear God, let us all be loving members of your family here on earth. Let's spread love and kindness each and every day to help all the children in your family. Amen.
Have a happy week. Stay safe and healthy and love.
Bye.